Temptations betrayed each other until the group fell apart. 10 fractures, 1 group, the Temptations. And I want to be precise about what this list is before we begin. This is not a story about a record company destroying 5 men. The industry did its damage. That is documented, and we will get to it. But most of this damage came from inside the group. They fired each other. They voted on each other in writing. They recorded a song attacking each other and released it as a single. By 1995, 4 of the 5 were dead. 1 man was left holding the name. This is their story, told properly. Number 10, the first man they cut. Before I tell you that Elbridge Bryant was the first Temptation ever removed, I need to tell you who he was. Because Otis Williams did not meet him in a recording studio. He met him in a Detroit neighborhood as a kid. They were best friends. They sang together in the Siberians. They sang together in the El Domingos. They sang together in the distance. Before there was a Temptations, there was Al and Otis. Born September 28, 1939, in Thomasville, Georgia. A tenor. They called him Al. They also called him Bones. In late 1960, he stood alongside Otis Williams, Melvin Franklin, Eddie Kendricks, and Paul Williams, and formed the group that signed with Motown in 1961. He was there for the beginning. He was also there for the failure, because from 1961 to 1963, 7 singles went out, and one of them charted. Dream Come True, number 22 on the R&B chart. That was it. Three years of nothing. Al Bryant had a day job delivering milk, and there were stretches where he preferred it. And then one night in mid-1963, after a show, backstage, he and Paul Williams got into an argument about whether the group should go back out for an encore. And Elbridge Bryant broke a beer bottle across Paul Williams' face. Paul went to the hospital. He needed stitches. It narrowly missed his eye. Now here is the part almost nobody tells you. The man who got hit, Paul Williams, talked the other 3 out of firing him. Paul argued for his friend. Paul bought him more time. And then, a few months later, at Motown's 1963 Christmas party, there was a second incident on stage, and this time the group let him go. By the first weeks of 1964, David Ruffin was standing in his spot. And in April of 1964, the Temptations released The Way You Do the Things You Do, and finally had their first top 20 pop hit. The group Al Bryant carried through 3 years of nothing became famous the moment he stopped being in it. He turned up in other Detroit groups. He never came close again. On October 26, 1975, Elbridge Bryant died of cirrhosis of the liver. He was 36 years old, the first of the Temptations to die, and the one almost nobody counts. Number 9, The Voice They Took the Lead. Before I tell you what happened to Eddie Kendricks, I need you to understand what he was. He was the sound. Union Springs, Alabama, born December 17, 1939. He met Paul Williams as a boy in Birmingham. They sang in a church choir together. And the falsetto he developed, light, clean, impossibly high, was the reason the Temptations had an identity at all before they had a hit. From 1961 to 1964, the lead vocals on that group were split mostly between Eddie Kendricks and Paul Williams. Kendricks sang lead on The Way You Do the Things You Do. That was the record that finally broke them. He was also the group's wardrobe man. He cared about how they looked walking into a room, and that mattered more than people realize. You know this song. It has been in your life a long time, but knowing the song and knowing what it cost inside that group are two different kinds of knowing. Let me give you the second one. Smokey Robinson wrote My Girl specifically for David Ruffin's voice, released at the end of 1964. On March 6, 1965, it went to number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100, and it was also the first number 1 on the newly reinstated Billboard R&B chart. Not just a hit, number 1 on both. And in that moment, the hierarchy of the Temptations changed permanently, and nobody had to say a word about it. By the end of 1965, David Ruffin was the group's main lead singer. Not one of two, the one. Kendrick still sang, Get Ready, You're My Everything, Please Return Your Love to Me, but he was no longer the center of the thing he had helped build. And when Ruffin was eventually removed in 1968, the lead did not go back to Eddie Kendricks. It went to Dennis Edwards, twice. He got passed over twice, in his own group, for a job he used to have. And I want to be clear about what I am saying. Nobody did anything wrong here. A great song found the right voice. That is how music works. But being demoted by a masterpiece is still being demoted, and Eddie Kendricks carried that for 6 more years before he walked. If this group was playing in your house growing up, you already understand what I mean when I say the falsetto was the Temptations. And the man who took that spot is next, because what he did with it is where this story turns. Real talk, only 9% of you are subscribed. That hurts. We're spending hours digging through archives, fact-checking every detail, bringing these stories back to life. And if you're watching this far, you clearly care. So hit subscribe. It's free and takes 2 seconds. Now, to my subscribers, barely any of you have joined the membership. And honestly, that stings even more. You know the work we put in. You keep coming back. If these videos have ever made you feel something, if this music means something to you, join the membership. It's one coffee a month and it's the only way we keep this going. Let's build this together. All right, back to it. Number 8, the limousine and the marquee. And before I tell you what David Ruffin demanded, I need to tell you who he was, because it makes the rest of it make sense. Born January 18, 1941, in Mississippi. Son of a Baptist preacher, he was singing gospel as a child, traveling with groups that opened for Mahalia Jackson. He spent time with the Dixie Nightingales and later the Soul Stirrers, the same group that had Sam Cooke in it. This was not a man who wandered into soul music. He was raised inside it. And when he joined the Temptations in January 1964, they didn't know what to do with him. He sang background for a year. Then Smokey Robinson heard something, mellow and gruff at the same time, he called it, and wrote him, "My Girl." And then it never stopped. It's growing. Since I lost my baby, ain't too proud to beg. Beauty is only skin deep. I know, I'm losing you. I wish it would rain. A run of records that would be a career for most singers, compressed into about 3 years. And somewhere in there, David Ruffin stopped riding with the group. He traveled separately, in his own limousine, lined with mink, with his name on the side of it. Then came the demand. Motown had been renaming its acts to feature lead singers, Diana Ross and the Supremes. Ruffin wanted the same. He wanted the group billed as David Ruffin and the Temptations, and the 4 other men in that group said no. But there was a second demand, and it is the one that gets left out. Ruffin also wanted an accounting of what the group was actually earning. He wanted to see the books. Motown partially gave in. The Temptations were permitted to hire an outside accounting firm, but that firm was never given full access because the group's management company was itself a Motown subsidiary. So hold both of those things at once. A man demanding his name in lights, and the same man demanding to know where the money went. History has kept the first one and quietly dropped the second. Number 7, June 27, 1968. I want to slow down here, because this is the day the classic Temptations ended, and most people have never heard how procedural it actually was. By 1968, David Ruffin was missing things: meetings, rehearsals, shows. He had begun using cocaine regularly, and it was making him unreliable in a group whose entire identity was precision. 5 men, 1 breath, choreography down to the wrist. On June 22, 1968, the Temptations had a date in Cleveland, Ohio. David Ruffin did not appear. He had gone to watch a performance by his girlfriend Barbara Gale Martin, Dean Martin's daughter, instead. And the other four decided that was the end of it. So on June 27, 1968, they did not have a conversation. They drew up legal documentation. 4 men, in writing, formally removing the fifth. The next day, the very next day, Dennis Edwards was hired. A singer out of the Contours, a man Otis Williams and Eddie Kendricks had already privately identified as the replacement before Ruffin was gone. Which tells you the decision was not made on June 27th. It was made before that, and June 22nd only gave it a date. And I will say clearly what most people won't. That is not a firing. That is a succession plan. Ruffin sued to be released from his Motown contract. Motown countersued to keep him. It's settled. He stayed on the label as a solo artist because he had always been signed to Motown separately from the group. He had his own contract the whole time. And more than a few people around that group believe that single fact is where all of it started. And here is the detail that has always stayed with me. Dennis Edwards and David Ruffin were friends. Ruffin encouraged him, told him to take the spot, meant it, at first. And then, 1 week later, he showed up at the show. Number 6, the man who kept coming back. Before I tell you what David Ruffin did on those stages, I need you to understand what he had just lost. Not a job, an identity. He had been the voice of the most important vocal group in America for 3 years. And then 4 men he'd sung with signed a document, and he was a solo artist with a limousine and nowhere to be. Dennis Edwards made his official debut with The Temptations on July 7, 1968, in Valley Forge, Pennsylvania. Ruffin came to the show as a member of the audience, and when the group went into Ain't Too Proud to Beg, David Ruffin walked out onto that stage, took the microphone out of Dennis Edwards' hands, sang his own lead, and left as fast as he had come. And the crowd loved it. That is the part that made it unbearable. The audience did not experience it as a humiliation. They experienced it as a gift. So he did it again and again. Through that entire July tour run, David Ruffin kept appearing, walking into venues, waiting for one of his songs, and taking it back in front of thousands of people. The group hired extra security specifically to keep one man out of their own concerts. He found ways in anyway. And according to Dennis Edwards, it very nearly worked. The reaction from those crowds, combined with Ruffin asking for another chance, brought the other 4 to the edge of taking him back. It came that close. And then he was late to the meeting where it was supposed to happen. I want to be precise about what this was, because it gets told as comedy. It was not comedy. It was a man who could not accept that a group could exist without him, proving it nightly, in public, to people who had paid to see somebody else. And whether that was pride or grief, I think you already know the answer. Number 5, what they did to Paul Williams. This name deserves to be spoken slowly. Paul Williams, born July 2, 1939, in the Inslee neighborhood of Birmingham, Alabama, son of a gospel singer. He met Eddie Kendricks in grade school. He was the Temptations' original lead singer. Before Ruffin, before My Girl, Paul Williams was the voice out front. And he was something else the group could not have existed without. He was the choreographer. Every step you have ever seen the Temptations do, the turns, the hands, the unified precision that made them the standard, every group after them was measured against. That was Paul Williams' work. He also had sickle cell disease. He had it the whole time. And by the late 1960s, as the lead vocals moved away from him and toward Ruffin, and then toward Dennis Edwards, he began drinking heavily. A boutique he opened in downtown Detroit failed and left him owing more than $80,000 in taxes. And the other 4 tried? That is documented, and it should be said. They poured out his bottles when they found them. They sat him down. They kept oxygen tanks backstage at shows. And when none of it worked, they made a decision. They hired another singer to sing his parts for him from behind the curtain, while Paul Williams stood on that stage and mouthed the words. The singer was Richard Street, a man from Otis Williams' old group, The Distance, working at that point in Motown's quality control department. He traveled with the Temptations and sang everything Paul sang, from off stage, out of sight. With a small mercy, they left Paul his signature numbers, Don't Look Back, and For Once in My Life. Those he still sang himself. On the nights he couldn't go on at all, Richard Street simply walked out and took his place. I know, I felt the same way when I found this. Take a second with it. Because I need you to picture the room. Thousands of people watching a founding member of the Temptations perform. And he is not performing. He is holding the shape of a man singing, while another man's voice comes out of the dark. In April 1971, he finally saw a doctor. They found a spot on his liver and told him to stop. He retired. Richard Street took the spot officially. 2 years later, on August 17, 1973, Paul Williams was found dead in a parked car in Detroit, not far from Hitsville. He was 34. The coroner ruled it a suicide. His family never accepted that ruling, and they have pointed to details in the report ever since. He had been recording solo material at the time, a single produced by his oldest friend, Eddie Kendricks, called "Feel Like Giving Up." Motown shelved it after he died. They said the title was too close to the truth. Number 4, The Man Who Sang Alone. I want to come back to Eddie Kendricks because we left him in 1965 losing the lead, and now I have to tell you how he left. He was not a difficult man by nature. He was a specific one. He believed the Temptations were a harmony group that sang songs about love, and he was watching Norman Whitfield turn them into something else entirely. Psychedelic soul, funk, social commentary, 5 men trading lines over a groove instead of singing to one person. He asked for room to record his own material in the old style. The group said no. He asked again, and the friction between Eddie Kendricks and Otis Williams, the group's leader, became the central fact of the Temptations' daily life. It came apart at the Copa. Otis Williams and Melvin Franklin left immediately after a show specifically to avoid another argument with him. Kendricks was so angry that he left too, and did not come back for the next show. After that, there was no repairing it, and then Norman Whitfield brought them Just My Imagination. And here is how that record was made. Eddie Kendricks could not get through the session with Otis Williams in the room. They worked for hours. It didn't happen, so Kendricks waited. He let the group leave, and when the studio was empty, he stayed behind and sang the lead vocal by himself. That is the take you know. One of the most tender vocals in the history of American popular music, recorded by a man who had to wait for his own group to go home. On April 3, 1971, Just My Imagination, Running Away With Me, reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100, where it stayed 2 weeks. It had already spent 3 weeks at number 1 on the R&B chart, the group's 11th R&B number 1. By the time it hit the top, Eddie Kendricks was gone. He quit in early April. It was the last Temptations single to feature him. It was also the last one to feature Paul Williams, who sings a single line on the bridge, in a voice you can hear the damage in. Two founding members, one record, both of them out the door as it climbed. Number 3, the record they made about their own. This is the one I mentioned earlier. And now that you have the full picture, Ruffin fired in '68, Kendricks gone in '71, Paul Williams retired and dying. You will understand why I said what I said. Because what happened next was not neglect. It was written, arranged, recorded over 4 sessions, pressed and sold. In 1971, David Ruffin was giving interviews. He was speaking about the Temptations and about Otis Williams in particular, and he was not being generous. Eddie Kendricks had left under conditions everybody in Detroit knew about. Both men were now Motown solo artists, in direct competition with the group they came from. So Norman Whitfield and Barrett Strong wrote a song. It was called Superstar. Remember how you got where you are. And it is, in plain terms, an attack record aimed at David Ruffin and Eddie Kendricks, the first great diss record in black popular music, released decades before anyone had a name for that. Recorded at Hitsville in September 1971, released October 17th, it went to number 18 on the Billboard Hot 100 and into the R&B Top 10. And now I need you to hold the detail that makes this unbearable. Superstar was the first Temptations single to feature the 2 new men, Damon Harris and Richard Street. Damon Harris had replaced Eddie Kendricks. Richard Street had replaced Paul Williams. Which means the voices calling David Ruffin and Eddie Kendricks ungrateful on a nationally distributed 45 belonged in part to the men who were standing in their spots. And the song sold better than anything Eddie Kendricks released on his own for 2 straight years. He had to hear it on the radio. Everyone did. It was on their car radios all through that winter. Let me be clear about what I am saying. This was not a rumor, or a grudge in a dressing room, or a bad quote in a magazine. This was a business decision to publish the conflict and take the money from it. Some of you just got quiet. That is the right response. Number 2. What a name is worth. Dennis Edwards. And I need to say who he was, because he is the one this list has treated as furniture so far. Born February 3, 1943, in Fairfield, Alabama. Preacher's son, gospel-trained, out of the contours. And when Motown handed him the impossible job of replacing David Ruffin, he did not imitate him. He came in with a rougher, harder, hotter voice, and he changed what the Temptations were allowed to be. Cloud 9, that record won Motown its first Grammy Award, the first one the company ever got in 1969, and the Temptations got it with Dennis Edwards singing I Can't Get Next to You. Number 1, Ball of Confusion. And then in 1972, Papa Was a Rolling Stone, number 1 on the Hot 100, and 3 Grammys at the ceremony the following March. 2 of the 4 number 1 pop singles in Temptations history have Dennis Edwards on them. He was not a substitute. He was the second act of that group. Otis Williams fired him in 1977, brought him back in 1980, fired him again in 1984, brought him back in 1987, fired him again in 1989. Three times, the man who sang Papa Was a Rollin' Stone was let go from the Temptations 3 separate times. And then it went to court. In the 1990s, Dennis Edwards was touring with his own group, billing it under variations of the name, including The New Temptations. Otis Williams sued him for trademark infringement. A federal judge barred Dennis Edwards from performing under the name of the group he had sung with, on and off, for roughly 2 decades. The settlement let him call it The Temptations Review, featuring Dennis Edwards. He worked under that billing for almost 20 years, until he died in 2018. And I want to be careful and fair here, because Otis Williams was protecting something real. There were groups all over America calling themselves the Temptations, who had never met a temptation. Somebody had to own that name, or it would have meant nothing. But understand what that protection cost. It meant that a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductee, standing on a stage in Missouri, was legally required to add 3 extra words before his own history. Number 1, the reunion and everything after it. 1982. And before I tell you how it ended, I need to tell you who these men were by then. David Ruffin was 41, and his solo career had never matched what he did in 3 years with that group. Eddie Kendricks had gotten to number 1 on his own with Keep On Truckin' in 1973, and then watched it recede. And both of them needed the work. That is not an insult. That is the situation. So Motown put them back together. Berry Gordy, Smokey Robinson, and Rick James on the same album. The record was called Reunion, released April 7, 1982. Ruffin and Kendricks alongside Otis Williams, Melvin Franklin, Dennis Edwards, Richard Street, and Glenn Leonard. 7 men. The single Standing on the Top went to the top of the R&B chart, and the tour sold out. People wanted this. People had wanted it for 14 years. It lasted 7 months, because the 2 things that broke it in the first place were still there. Ruffin's cocaine addiction had become a crack addiction, and he missed shows, enough of them that the group was fined thousands of dollars for each absence. And Eddie Kendricks, after 30 years of smoking, could no longer reliably reach the falsetto that was the entire reason the audience was in the building. In November 1982, Otis Williams ended it. Ruffin and Kendricks were out for the second time. And they never went back. The Classic Five were never all in the same working group again for the rest of their lives. Here is what the next 9 years did. June 1st, 1991. David Ruffin died in Philadelphia at 50, 3 weeks after a tour of England with Kendricks and Dennis Edwards. He arrived at the hospital unconscious with no identification and $53 in his pockets. It took an FBI fingerprint check to confirm who he was. He had been carrying an estimated $40,000 in a money belt that night. It was never recovered. His family could not afford the funeral. Michael Jackson, a man who was not in that group, not on that label, not part of any of this, quietly paid for it. On June 10, 1991, at New Bethel Baptist Church in Detroit, with thousands of people in the street outside, the Temptations sang "My Girl" over David Ruffin's casket. October 5, 1992. Eddie Kendricks died of lung cancer in Birmingham, Alabama, 52 years old. He had a lung removed the year before, and he spent that last year telling children not to smoke. February 23, 1995. Melvin Franklin, the base, the foundation, one of only 2 men who never left, died in Los Angeles. 52. Paul Williams in 1973. David Ruffin in 1991. Eddie Kendricks in 1992. Melvin Franklin in 1995. Otis Williams is the last one. He is 84 years old. He owns the rights to the name, and the Temptations are still touring. The group did not fall apart. That is the part that took me a long time to sit with. The men fell apart. The name was fine.